Ed Robertson, and this is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast, where I introduce you to some of the innovative and creative individuals who are helping to shape the future of the American West. I meet most of these people through my work in ranch brokerage and land conservation, or through my hobbies and interests that revolve around spending time up high in the mountains. My guests include ranchers, writers, entrepreneurs, conservationists, athletes, artists, pretty much anyone who's doing important work and has an interesting story to tell. My guest today is Scott Slusher. Scott is an Oklahoma native and a Texas-based photographer who's best known for his stunning images of cowboys and life on working ranches. After seeing Scott's work, it's crystal clear that he has a deep understanding of the ranching lifestyle and that he's invested more than his fair share of time out in the heat and dust, on horseback, or in the branding pen. Given his immersion in the tough, hard-nosed world of ranching, you may be surprised to learn that Scott was trained as a fashion photographer and still works with a variety of big-name companies on their fashion and clothing line spreads. So what allows Scott to have such success in two worlds so diametrically opposed as ranching and fashion? Well, as you'll hear in this interview, Scott has a habit of pursuing his interest with a single-minded intensity and curiosity, unafraid of getting in over his head, venturing outside his comfort zone, or working harder than is expected. Combine those traits with endless energy and a knack for making friends with everyone he meets, and you'll understand how Scott has managed to work his way onto iconic ranches, riding alongside and photographing some of the best ranch hands in the business. Scott's enthusiasm and love of people really comes through in our conversation, so I know you'll enjoy it. We talked about his childhood in Oklahoma and how his father's work as a vet and as a horse breeder shaped his outlook. We chatted about his time as a photography intern and how he chose to dive headfirst into no-fun chores like mopping the floor, and how that optimistic, high-energy approach has paid off time and again throughout his career. We also chat about how he broke into photographing cowboys and how his respectful approach has allowed him to be accepted by ranch hands throughout the West. We covered a ton, so be sure to check out the episode notes for the full list of topics and links. If you don't already, be sure to follow Scott on Instagram. His handle is @SlusherPhoto. If you love the West and the ranching lifestyle, I can guarantee you'll love his work. Hope you enjoy this episode. When you meet somebody for the first time, never met them before, and they ask you that question, what do you do? How do you answer that?
So I answer that I am a professional photographer, and what I really say is I'm a commercial photographer. And then they kind of give me a look like, what does that mean? So I follow that up with, I'm a commercial photographer. I shoot a lot for, JCPenney's, Mary Kay, Yeti, Justin Boots, 44 Farms, Ranch Road Boots, just a different, I kind of give them just a kind of an idea, because when they say commercial photographer, what does that mean? And then I also don't want to get put in the category of, just your run-of-the-mill photographer. I want people to know, not necessarily that, that it's a big thing or anything like that, but just, I'm not just somebody peering over a barbed wire fence, with a long lens and all that kind of stuff. So I want people to know that, I do make a living in it, because there's a lot of people who are like, is this kind of a hobby or something like that? And I'm like, no, I'm a full-time, pay the bills photographer. And so that's just kind of the way I kind of go about it. So, and people can take it as they want to. I ramble a lot, so.
No, that's good, man. That's the whole reason to have you on the podcast. I think the cool thing in your answer there is you said you had the full spectrum there. You had JCPenney, and then you had Justin's Boots. And, to a lot of people, that's kind of two different ends of the spectrum. And that's one of the things I thought was super interesting about your background is you've got a background in fashion and fashion photography, and then you've also got this really you're really well known in the niche of the cowboy world. And so how did that come to be? I mean, I guess maybe the easiest thing to do is start out, where did you grow up? And have you always been artistic?
I grew up in Stillwater, Oklahoma. My dad was, he's now retired, but he's a veterinarian. He was a horse breeder for Oklahoma State University. He started the breeding ranch there south of town off of Highway 51. And his specialty was a therogenealogist. And so any chance that, so he grew up in central Kansas in the Flint Hills on, his dad had a cattle ranch, and then my mom's family was southern Kansas, and they had a wheat farm and soybeans and milo and stuff like that. So any chance I could get to either one of those places was, what I was into.
Yep.
I wasn't sitting inside. I never had video games or anything like that. If I was outside, I grew up, wanting to be outside, riding a motorcycle. Always wanted a horse my whole life. Always wanted a horse. But so any chance I could be out at the ranch with my dad or something like that, that was a good day, because that's where I really wanted to be. I never really wanted to be in school or anything like that. My mom always said, I just know it. You're going to go to art school. And I was like, art school? What the heck? Like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I don't paint. I don't draw. I mean, I'm decent at drawing and stuff like that. And so growing up, looking back on the whole thing, my dad, he was a hobbyist photographer, and he would always hand me the camera, no matter if it was there for a while. I think we had a video camera, but he didn't ever show me. I didn't ever see any of the videos or something like that. But when my dad would go on a hunting trip with his buddies, or, cross country, road trip with one of his buddies, he'd come back and he would sit us all down, and we'd watch a slideshow, and I would still be the only one awake at the end of the 2 hours of slides that he would go through and stuff like that. But
how old are you?
I am 38.
Okay, yeah, so we're about the same age. I'm 39, and so yeah, you grew up in I remember the slideshows. A lot of people, it's amazing. Like kids that people in their 20s now, they really didn't know much about slides.
No.
The digital cameras have kind of taken over. So all right, I just wanted some context as to what era you were in. All right, that makes sense.
But I like looking back to it, trying to go back to the main question. But growing up, it's all there. And that's kind of how my life goes is still to this day, if somebody says, they're just the other day, somebody was telling a story, and I was like, holy shit, that's an epic story. Like, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And so that's how, I was just kind of going through the motions there, in my hometown, growing up and stuff like that. And I worked at a veterinary clinic in high school. I was a veterinary technician, and I had my time developing stuff. It wasn't in the dark room. It was in the x-ray room. Like, yep. I developed x-rays and helped, anything I could do to help. I'm just a hard worker. That's one thing that I come from is just hard work and doing so. And growing up, like in Stillwater, like I started out, game planning, let's go to, college and Oklahoma State and all this kind of stuff. And so that was the game plan. I never went to class. I didn't really ever want to, it was just one of those deals. So I'm more of a social person. So I get out and meet people and do all that kind of stuff. And so, one day my sister was telling a story, and she lives in Tulsa, mm-hmm. and my dad had, at that time, so I graduated in 98, do the math on that. It's a little bit off on as far as, how old I am. My wife always makes fun of me. Like, you graduated in 98, but I graduated, because we're the same age. She's like, I graduated in 96.
You married up.
Yeah, exactly. And so so my sister was telling, so at that time, in 98, my parents, my dad he tried to get a sabbatical with Oklahoma State University and ended up getting a job in United Arab Emirates. He bred Sheikh Mohammed's thoroughbred racing horses there in Dubai. And so they moved over there in like a matter of like 2 weeks. I mean, it was like we knew it, like they had already they have gone over there. And my sister and I like, why are they going over there to Dubai? I've never even heard of Dubai.
Yeah.
And so they got back and they were like, we're moving over there. And we were just like, holy crap, like you're moving halfway across the world. Like, how's this going to work? And so they ended up keeping the house there. And then at this time, my sister, she's already married and has like one kid at that time in Tulsa. And so they just so my dad moves over there, my mom moves over there, and then to have a visa there, you can only be there for an X amount of time, and then you got to come back for a month, and then you can go. So the month of August, my mom was always back.
Okay.
For like 8 years, I believe. And so one day my sister's telling a story, and I forget where we were going or something like that, and she tells a story about how she's getting her nails done or something like that, and I'm kind of trying to figure out, school and where I'm kind of headed in life. And I'm probably, I don't know, 23 or something at this point.
Yep.
And she says, she starts telling a story about how this kid is going to art school and fashion design in Dallas. And I was like, now wait a second, now what, an art school? And so she starts telling more about it. And literally that night I go back to my house and I get online and I start researching it and I just apply. Mm-hmm. Next day I get an email says I've been accepted. The next day I drive down to Dallas and they recommend like 3 apartment complexes. So I go to the first one. Yeah, this one will work. I sign a lease. I go back to Oklahoma, rent a U-Haul, pack all my shit up, and literally move down to Dallas within a matter of, 2 weeks. And start going to fashion design school. Who, why, when, where, I have no idea. But it was just like a light bulb went off in my head and said, this is where you need to be. And so, first day of school, and I never in my life have I ever made straight A's, made the dean's list, a president of your class, any of that stuff. I was all that stuff.
Really?
So, yeah. I mean, I had never made straight A's in my life. And just, I mean, literally it was just something, everything fell into, that's where I met my wife. She was always just, so she was president of the class. And so I didn't have any friends. I had a couple of friends in Dallas, but they all had real jobs. And so during the day, there wasn't anything to do but go to class. So That's what I did. So each class was 3 hours long. Everything was hands-on, just straight up my alley. So when it came time for, like a class meeting or something like that, I was like, man, I don't have anything else to do, so I'm going to hang out and see what this class meeting's all about. So they were like, hey, let's do so-and-so's doing like a fashion show this weekend, and do we have any people who want to volunteer? And like my wife, who at that time I didn't even really know her, she would be like, Scott will do it. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And it was just because I always showed up to class. I was very reliable. I was a common face that always showed up. And there was a lot of flaky, people. And I was the only one that, like if it came time for something, we had to set something up, I was the only one with a truck in the whole fashion department. You know what I mean? Like,
it just kind of all lined up.
Yeah, there was a couple guys, you know what I mean?
Sure.
That I was buddies with and all that kind of stuff. And so it was like, hey, Slusher's got a truck. We need to move some walls. I'm like, hell yeah, dude, I got a truck. I can strap that stuff down and let's lift some walls. Let's do some stuff. So that all turned into it. And I was literally, I didn't graduate with a degree in photography or anything like that. When my wife is a fashion stylist, so she does a lot for J.C. Penney's today, and so her job is to go in there, and she has an assistant, and they steam and iron the clothes, and then the client's like, hey, that shirt, and belt, and let's make it look more like this, and maybe we should change that shirt, or that's her job. So when it came time for an internship, that's how the photography thing evolved.
Okay.
They were like, well, what do you? I was like, my internship's coming up, and they were like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. Everybody else is a stylist, in the family and stuff like that. Like her brother's a stylist, and their other two brothers are set builders, and they have a set building business. And so they were like, well, don't do, let's figure something out. And so the person that she was mentoring under like 10 years ago, she's now on her own doing her own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they were both like, well, why don't you try photography? And I was like, all right, well, what photographers in town should I call to get an internship? So they were like, there's two people you should call, and I'm not going to mention any names. One of them is, really great photographer. They're both really great photographers, but one, if you can work for this guy, you can work for anybody you want to, because he's old school. He's kind of an asshole kind of a deal.
Yeah.
So literally, they mentioned those two people. I called the first one. The first guy answers the phone. I tell him who I am. He knows who my wife at that time was. We were just dating.
Yep.
He knew her. He knew the guy that she because they always worked with these photographers, and so he knew of these people. So he was like, "Sure, I'll take free manual labor," and so there I go. So I start out. What was also perfect is he owned a little, he owned like 50 acres south of Dallas. And so he was always, hey, I need help, fixing fence and weed and mowing and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, hey, I'm a man for that. I know how to do all that stuff, and so it was half working out there and half cleaning up the studio. In those days, you had to help clean up the studio. Like I have a studio here, and I couldn't even tell you the last time I saw an assistant mop the floor or something like that. I mop the floor almost for sure once a week, if it wasn't every other day, like sweeping, mopping, taking the trash out, really paying your dues back in those days. And that wasn't even that long ago. Like we were still shooting film, when I first started out. So my first job it started out mowing and weeding and fixing fence and helping, him do all this kind of stuff. And then it migrated into, I do know I've learned what a C-stand is. I know what this light kind of does. And you just kind of progress in that situation. And then it kind of evolves a little bit into more, all right, well, hey, Slusher, why don't you grab this camera and here's how you load film into it and all kinds of stuff. So every day it kind of evolved, and I was loading cameras. It was kind of like the guy that the photographer. And at those days, like we did a lot of sets and lights and film and a lot of location stuff. And this photographer takes a trailer load full of stuff when we went on location, and it was all like J.C. Penney stuff, and so that just kind of made sense. And so it was just one of those deals where everything's hands-on. I'm really good at hands-on stuff. So if I can learn with my hands and figure everything out, then shoot, the rest of it's pretty easy. So
yeah, it sounds like one of your keys is that you're not afraid to just jump in and give something a try, and you're always willing to kind of help out. Like just jump in and start working. Whether it's carrying those walls around at art school or mopping the floor and doing all that with a positive attitude. It seems like that's been one of the things that's opened doors for you. I mean, is that something that's just kind of natural to your personality, or is that something your parents kind of drove into your head as a kid, or is it kind of a combo of both?
I think it's a combo of both. I mean, everything that I do in life is just, if as long as you are working hard towards what you want to do, and you may not know it at the time, that it kind of goes back to everything else too. Like, one of your questions, and I'll kind of parlay into this, like, is how I started out, doing Western photography and stuff like that from fashion. Well, with fashion, you got to have, at a minimum 5 to 10 people to do a day's worth of work. You got to have a stylist, you got to have a stylist assistant, you got to have a producer, you got to have an art director, you got to have the photographer, you got to have photo assistants, a digital tech, all this stuff. And so I was like, so in order to further your photography career, you do what's called testing. And so you get like a hairstylist, a hair and makeup artist, you get a stylist, you get a model, and you get yourself, and you kind of all work for free to get your portfolio going. So everybody kind of works for free to strum up some business is basically what it is. So, on days that I wasn't working or something like that, it was like, hey, so-and-so went, oh man, I'm working. Oh, well, hey, and I'm working. So it's like, man, I gotta have something else that I need to be doing that is that I can go do by myself. And so one day I was out, my wife's from Munster, Texas, and they have a German fest every year. So, for a while we were going to that every year. And the place where we'd camp at with all our friends was next to another camp. And everybody kind of knows each other and stuff like that. So I was talking to one guy, and his name is Jeff Besner, and he's a 365-day cowboy at the R.A. Brown Ranch. And I was like, really? Well, that's cool, da-da-da-da-da. And so he's telling me all about that. And so I don't know how much time went by, but it was a little while where I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to call this guy, this Jeff Besner, and see if I can come out to the R.A. Brown Ranch. And so I call him up, and he's like, hey, Slusher, what's going on? Yeah. And I was like, hey, I'm trying to get into doing a little bit more, Western stuff. And I don't even know if I said that or not, but I was just like, hey, can I come out and take some pictures? I can borrow a horse and a saddle and whatever else I need to borrow. He's like, heck yeah. So I go out there, and, and they're all they were doing was, like, the first day that I got there, I was there for a week, and they were just doing their normal stuff. And I started taking pictures of it. And I got back to the studio after that week, and my studio mates I was showing them all the stuff I went to, and they were like, dude, this is really good. I was like, really? They were like, yeah, this is good stuff. And I was like, all right. So then people started noticing that. Like, people, when I did my fashion stuff, people would see it and say, that's cool. It's cool. It's good and all that kind of stuff. But it was different whenever people saw the Western lifestyle stuff.
Sure.
And it wasn't anything that anybody else has ever done as far as, like, Western photographers and stuff like that. But it was, I don't know if it was something that you can tell, and just by what people tell me and all kind of stuff. And I absolutely enjoy it. I love it. But people have said, I can tell that you really enjoy that. You really get into it. You really make it come alive and all kind of stuff. And it's one of those deals where a lot of people don't really know what a cowboy does these days. They think it's on a four-wheeler or something like that. And I don't want to take pictures of somebody on a four-wheeler. No offense to anybody who gets out on a four-wheeler and goes and does something, because
it just doesn't make for a good picture, though. It's like somebody driving a car. Exactly. Big deal.
If Polaris or like a company says, hey, well, sure, by all means, let's go out there and let's do that.
If it's Polaris asking, I love four-wheelers.
But it's one of those deals where authentic, real is kind of my MO, and that's another way to parlay back into explaining what people to tell people what I do is I do authentic, real things, and that has turned into Yeti and Mary Kay and other clients that are like, oh, really? Like, yeah, like Mary Kay. They're like, well, what do you shoot for Mary Kay? And I'm like, I shoot their I Can campaign for that is all about Mary Kay and I Can. So what is your I Can campaign? Well, when I'm shooting at their convention, and it's 80 ladies a day, and I have to meet every single one of them and talk to them and get them comfortable in front of the camera and all that kind of stuff. And what I tell them is like, hey, I can tell you all day what to do, like, put your hand here, or do something like that. But that's not real. That's not what you want to be portrayed as. Mm-hmm. I want you to be who you are. And if that's an awkward laugh or a giggle and you're looking off camera or something like that, that's real, and that makes for what that is. And it works. It is real. And so they're like, oh wow, it's authentic, just making people feel comfortable. And sure. that's kind of what it is meeting people and making them feel comfortable. So trying to parlay back into, I keep on saying that word, but back into your question. So I don't know. What was our question?
No, that all makes perfect sense. And it seems like your ability to relate with people. So like you gave the Mary Kay example, and then so that's one end of the spectrum, and then these hardcore working cowboys, that's another end of the spectrum. And these guys, I do a lot of work with ranchers and cowboys, and they're generally a tough crowd. And I mean, they're as good and as hardworking and as authentic people as you can ever meet. But a lot of times they can be kind of somewhat suspicious of outsiders. I come in up in Montana, I come in with a Southern accent. They're kind of like, who the hell is this guy? And, mm-hmm. But once you can, establish with them or prove that you're authentic and hardworking and things like that, they really open up. How was it kind of breaking into that world of ranches and ranchers, especially when you're out there in the middle of, like, in branding, when they're working hard, it's dangerous. How did they take to a guy being out there kind of in the middle of it all, taking photos? Did that take some time to kind of build trust with him?
So pretty much everywhere I've gone, everybody has been, extremely, extremely, they may not know who I am or anything like that, but they, so if I showed up there's no way I would, but if I showed up in my wife's, 2001 X5, and I rolled up in some tight jeans and, in a floppy cowboy hat or something like that, then I get out of my car and walk over and get in the mix with all of them. They're going to be like, who the hell is this? So, when it came time for me to start doing this, going out and all that kind of stuff, my wife was like, you're going to do what? And I'm like, yeah, I am. Like, I have to fit in with these guys and cowboys and cowgirls or whoever. And I have to, like, when I go out, so there's a whole code and all that kind of stuff. Like, that was a whole learning experience. The first time I went to the Sixes, a lot of my friends were there, and I would, I stand back. I don't get in anybody's way. Mm-hmm. I don't. I sure as heck don't tell anybody what to do or anything like that. Like, I was talking on the phone last night with Buster Frierson. And I said, it's one of those things where if everybody's out working and I said, hey, Teal Blake, you mind? And he obviously, he might do it, but he probably wouldn't. But if I said, hey, Teal, do you mind going up there and getting off your horse while we're gathering cattle or something like that, or in the branding pen? Hey, you mind doing this or doing that? And he kind of looks at me like, what? No, he's not going to do that. Like I have to be in the right place at the right time. And I've only been yelled at once.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty good ratio there. Cause that's some tough work. And it's dangerous.
It is. And, there's been some times where, obviously not on the first day and probably not on the second day, but by the third day, everybody's kind of like, at the spring, there was a couple of guys that didn't know who I was and all kind of stuff. And we're gathering cattle and all kind of stuff. And it's high mesquite and brushy and all that kind of stuff. And, these cowboys, they know what's going on. They're bobbing through all the trees and, and ducking and doing all that kind of stuff. Well, I got a camera in my hand. And at the end of that first day, one of the guys was like, man, you're pretty handy with that camera. And I go, well, I got to, all you guys are ducking in between and going in between the trees and all kind of stuff. And I gotta keep up with you guys. He's like, man, he said it aloud to be like, hey, this guy, he's got it going on. You know what I mean? Like, and so I take pride in the fact that, I'm learning just as much as somebody, because I didn't grow up doing, roping and all that kind of stuff and branding and doing all and everything like that. So there's Teal or whoever, and go back to the sixes. So I
explain what the sixes is for people that don't know.
The four sixes ranch,
big ranch.
Yep. Yeah, and so every morning, they get up at I think they meet at the chuck wagon. They call it the Fly for breakfast and coffee at let's say 5:15. Well, I show up at 5 o'clock because I don't want to be late. You know what I mean? I'm not the first one. I don't want to be the one that's already eaten before everybody else because that's not very nice either because I'm just a guest there and all kind of stuff. So I'm just, I'll get a cup of coffee and there's chairs sitting all the way around and people will start filing in and stuff like that. So, no one said, hey, Slusher, this is kind of what we're doing or anything like that. It's just, visually you got to kind of know what's going on. It's just common sense, basically, ethics and common sense. And so, so everybody starts filing in and starts chatting all kind of stuff. And so, I'm just listening and everything like that. And then let's all go, they'll go catch their horses. And so it's still done at the sixes, all the horses are in a pen and somebody ropes it and it's dark. And so they're all standing in a line in like a semicircle, so the horses don't run off and all kind of stuff. There's one guy roping it. And so, Dusty Burson at the sixes, he says, hey, Slusher, come over here. And so he just gives me the lowdown. He's like, hey, Slusher, and I'm riding one of, actually it's True. I'm sorry, I take that back. It's True Burson. Mm-hmm. And True says, hey, Slusher, come over here. And I'm riding one of his horses. So I don't even know what the horse looks like. And so he goes, hey, I'll let you know when your horse is up. And so all you do is you just, hey, or you give some type of signal that says that's my horse or something like that. And so the guy that's roping it brings it over and you have to stand on a certain side of it. And he takes the rope off and then you wrap your reins around it and all that kind of stuff. And then you put the bridle on, all that kind of stuff. And you just stand there and you wait for everybody to do it. So it's just, if I didn't know a single person there, I wouldn't even have been in there.
Sure.
So the fact that I got to be in there and witness that, and I was taking pictures as it was going on. And so I kind of get like a hall pass, I guess you could say, for having a camera, and I get to sit back and watch and kind of see how it's all done.
Well,
I think
you do get a hall pass, but I think you're not giving yourself enough credit, because I think you've earned that hall pass, because there's I'd say 99% of professional photographers who walked in there with their camera, they would not be accepted. They either wouldn't be tough enough, they wouldn't be respectful. It sounds like you're very tuned into being respectful to the process. You've got this ability to work as hard as anybody else, with tough, hard physical work. I think I think your ability to take your photography skills are one thing, but I think your interpersonal skills and your ability to relate with people gets a lot of the credit as well. Because you could take, I don't know, some fancy New York City photographer and put them out there, and they wouldn't make it an hour. I don't think that's not an exaggeration, is it? I think
I don't know.
Most people wouldn't make it.
They wouldn't be. I don't know if if I didn't know anybody, that's the whole deal. So is I realize, and it just goes for anything. Like, you have to be able to know people in order to, in any situation. If it's being a lawyer and you want to work for this lawyer, you got to get to know those lawyers that work for that lawyer, all that kind of stuff. So, it's all about networking. So, and just getting to know these people before I go out there and start taking pictures and doing all that kind of stuff. That's another part of it.
Building that trust. Yeah.
Building that trust. And social media has a whole lot to do with that. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of those guys don't have an Instagram, but a lot of them do. And so, they see that I'm out at the sixes. And when I went to the 4-6s, that really kind of put us, in my mind, it kind of put a stamp on me that says, holy, dang, he went to the 4-6s ranch. Like, not just anybody, I don't think, can go to the 4-6s ranch and go out and gather and come back and know the right way. Cause I don't, when I go to these ranches, I don't, some of them, like out of the Spade Ranch, I know that I'm familiar with his name's Jason Pelham, and he runs the North Camp up there in Canadian. He's always like, Slusher, if you want to go up on top of the hill or get in front of the herd or anything you want to do, you just go out and do it. We don't really care or anything like that. And I just don't do it. I stay in my line of where I started out that morning, just like every other cowboy does, just because I don't want anybody to be like, man, Slusher really messed up, that deal. He was all over the place and all that kind of stuff. So there might be a day where that does come to the forefront, and I get out there and I get in front of the herd and take those pictures. But for the most part, I just want it to go smooth. I don't want anybody to be like, damn, Slusher really messed up on that deal. You know what I mean? Like, that's fine if I do, because I don't know exactly, or those cowboys, they know that kind of stuff. I'm not a cowboy. I'm just a Western photographer that loves to go out there and be horseback and try to fit in with the rest of them to where they do accept me and all that kind of stuff. Because I'm nowhere near or even close to what a cowboy can do and all that kind of stuff. I'm just horseback and a guy with a camera is all I am. So and I have had the opportunities to, hey Slusher, you wanna do this, do that, and if it makes sense, then I'll help out and all kind of stuff. I love to help out. That's what I like to do. So more than happy to. But I'm the first one to say I've never done this before. So if you're going to put me in that position, I just want you to know that I want to be as open as I can to what's going on. So I'd much rather take pictures than do anything else. So
when you're out there with these guys, for people that haven't actually been there in the middle of this thing, like for branding, for example, there's hundreds of cows running around, calves getting separated from their mothers, and the mother cows charging people, and there's hot iron and fire and people giving vaccinations. I mean, it's mud, and I mean, it's really kind of a chaotic type environment, pretty dangerous. And that's just one small event out of a year. So have you had any close calls or scary things happen, you know, getting thrown off a horse or anything like that, where you kind of checked you a little bit?
So when it, you know, when it first starts out, they drop everybody off, and depending on who I'm with or where I'm at, you know, they might drop me off by myself, and I'm there gathering with everybody else. So what gathering is you're dropped off in a 10,000 acre, you know, pasture, and you're gathered cattle. So you have to zigzag back and forth to check back with your person who's on the left of you and who's on the right of you. And you can't get ahead of anybody, and you can't be too far behind. So you got to do, and you're looking for cattle at the same time. So there's sometimes where I'm dropped off with somebody else. And I like both aspects, because, you know, I'd rather take pictures of somebody than just some landscape stuff. I'm not, if I see a deer and all kind of stuff, or, you know, or something like that, I'll be like, oh, look, you know, there's a deer and all kind of stuff. But I'm not going to be like, you know, oh shoot, dude, I'm going to try and get around there and take a picture of that deer or anything. I could care less about that deer. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So I'll take some landscape pictures, but for the most part, I want somebody in my pictures. So if I get dropped off with somebody, that's fine with me. And I'll get my own little stretch and all kind of stuff. And usually it's somebody that I know, and I'll peel around. Or, you know, I've been to a ranch where I got dropped off with, you know, the boss, and he just kind of wants to know a little bit more about me. So that's more of like an interview process where we're just kind of getting to know each other or something like that. So close encounters. So when it comes to that kind of stuff, you know, I mean, usually, my horse is he's a good horse. He's not going to put me in a situation where, you know, he's going to get bronky on me, or, you know, he's going to buck me off or something like that. So, I mean, he's kind of snorty every once in a while, and he'll, we got to kind of work through our situation and all kind of stuff. And, you know, and that's any horse is like that. So we'll kind of have an understanding and all kind of stuff. And then, you know, if I'm on somebody else's horse, you know, it's usually, I've never had any issues of anything like a wreck or anything like that, but I've heard plenty of stories of other people and stuff like that. So I try to, you know, I'm not cutting it loose and, you know, jumping gaps and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there are situations where we are trotting through and all that kind of stuff, but I haven't ever, knock on wood, I haven't had anything, you know. And it's partly, you know, if you're smart and you know where things are coming and going and all kind of stuff, you kind of have to have eyes in the back of your head. And, you know, I'm usually not putting myself in a dangerous situation to where I can get hurt, that kind of deal. So I'm on a horse that I know what I can expect. When I'm in the branding pen, you know, I kind of get, you know, I don't start out, you know, just straight up, you know, in somebody's face or something like that. It's, you know, it's all right, this is where this guy's, you know, over here and this guy's over here, and we're, you know, going this way and all kind of stuff. And, you know, you don't want to get in front of somebody, or you don't want to be somebody with the needles and, you know, the pistols and all that kind of stuff. So the giving injections, you don't want to be somewhere where you can get hurt and stuff like that. So I take it in stride. This is a funny story. One of the stories, so we went to Teal and I, Teal took his girlfriend at that time. I took my wife and son, who was 6 at the time. And we went to, Dickens, Texas for, they put on a new bronc ride there. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of guys I know in the arena, horse, you know, it's broncs and stuff like that. So it's, you know, in a arena with bulls and all that kind of stuff, like at a rodeo. I'm not PRCA approved. That's a whole process.
Mm-hmm.
That's another story, but I've only had one. I've only been inside the arena of an actual PRCA rodeo in Pendleton, which was, I mean, my first ever time inside, and it's Pendleton, Oregon, which is completely epic by all means. But so we're in Dickens, Texas, and it's Teal and I in the arena, and Teal, his pictures, he wants to be further back, to take a picture because he's gonna paint that and all kind of stuff. Me, I wanna get the grit and be up in there and all kind of stuff and get like a close picture. Because when I see a picture of somebody at something, I kind of see where they're at, and I'm like, man, I guess they didn't have all that great access, or I guess you know what I mean. Like that's kind of where I think of, and so I want people to think like, oh dang,
you're right in the middle of it.
Yeah, like right up in there. So Pat Butler's on a bronc, and the gate opens up, and that horse, I mean, just beelines it straight for me, and I'm right there, and everybody starts scattering, and I'm looking through the viewfinder and pushing that button, and I'm like, oh shit, it's getting closer and closer, and I'm like, oh damn, and so I run to the fence, but I'm still halfway looking through the viewfinder, and it's knee high is just a flat panel, and then you got to hop up onto the first level of the fence.
Oh yeah.
Which is a bar, and so I couldn't. I kind of knew it, but I just kind of sat there and I was like, man, this is not going to be good. And I just was like, just as long as the horse doesn't step on me or just completely just mow me over, everything's going to be all right. Well, that bronc comes out of there and comes right for me and brushes up against my shoulder. Luckily, I didn't get stepped on. And Pat Butler gets bucked off, and I can kind of see above me. Well, his butt lands right on the top of my head, and I didn't fall to the ground. Luckily, Pat Butler's not that. He's probably 150 pounds and 5'5" or 6" or something like that. So he's not the biggest guy in the world. So yeah. I was thankful of that. But that was probably and it was like, Slusher, I think that was close enough. You know what I mean?
That's a pretty close call. I love how you kind of had forgotten about that.
But it's not going to stop me from, going there next year and doing the exact same, because, it's fun, and I love being out there, and I love going to places where they're like, Slusher, you have access to whatever you want to do. That's the places I want to go and take pictures.
Have you ever been to rodeo? Have you ever been to Central America?
I have not. They
have they call them rodeos down there, and it's basically they just build a pen in the middle of town, and it goes from town to town over the weekend. And I'm not exaggerating. I'll send you pictures. I'll email you some pictures to prove it. But they basically just build this pen, and they get these wild ass bulls, and they just let them loose in the pen, and all the people in the town go out and stand in the middle of the pen. I'm not joking, like 100 people, and then this bull starts running around out there and throwing people in the air and like just smashing over them, and people are getting dragged out in stretchers, and they're all drunk. I mean, it was literally the craziest thing I've ever seen. And I was thinking somebody needs to be down there, like a really good photographer or videographer capturing this thing, because I've seen a lot of crazy stuff, and this is one of the craziest things I've ever seen. I mean, people getting knocked out cold, dragging them all, like people with obvious spine injuries getting dragged off. I'll send you pictures. You need to go down there. That could be your next story. I want to come though. You gotta let me come. I'll be your business manager.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm down. Let's go.
One more question about your photography. We were kind of joking around when we were texting before this thing about social media and just how it's kind of, there's a lot of good to it and also a lot of bad as far as the distractions it can cause when you got other stuff going on. But you've got a huge social media following, and how has that kind of played into your I guess progression as a professional photographer?
It has 110% been something that has been a major tool in a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of my clients, have come from or seen those pictures on Instagram. So I treat Instagram, not necessarily Facebook, but I treat Instagram almost like my website. Mm-hmm. Like if you scroll way back and start looking at stuff, you can see the progression of how it changed. And a photo rep in Dallas, she represents some of my fine art images, and I've come across this before where I was doing an Insta walk when Instagram, it had been out for a while. This is probably about 4 years ago, and I got it was with GE, and it was like enter a contest to win a spot to be in an Insta walk with other photographers. And basically what you do is you go out and take pictures, and then you post to social media and you post to their account. Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't. I just went, and they were like, to enter, all you have to do was take a picture of a train, because it was going to be at the GE factory here in Fort Worth, of the process of how they go through and how they manufacture the engine, like
sure,
and all that kind of stuff. And so we were at a friend's house in Fort Worth, and so I just went, and their house is literally across the street from a train tracks, and there was a train engine sitting there, and so I went over there and took a picture of it. It wasn't like anything crazy or anything like that. And so I took one picture. I entered that contest, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, well, yeah, you're a winner," and all that kind of stuff. Like, really? And I was like, all right. And I think it was just like, hey, he's local, da-da-da-da-da. He's a, whatever photographer. So they send like a limousine over to pick me up. I'm staying at a hotel, and the night before you meet all the other photographers. And then the next day it's going to the factory to, you're going to team up with such and such, and you guys are going to and somebody from GE is going to walk you around and kind of tell you about this, and then we'll switch and do all that kind of stuff. Well, I'm with what I call the cool kids of the Instagram at that time, and literally they all had, 20K followers at that time, maybe 100K followers. And for that, at that time, and on Instagram, that was a lot.
Sure.
And at that time, I only had probably maybe 3K or 5K. Uh-huh. And so the next morning we get on the bus and all kinds of stuff. And we met everybody, I'm from LA, I'm from New York, and I'm from blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, wow, this is, these are some heavy hitters, I guess. And so the next morning we roll on the bus, and everybody's getting off the bus, and they all got their camera bags. And I'm like, camera bags? Huh. And this was when the iPhone 5 had just come out. And so I had just gotten the iPhone 5, and I was like, dude, this is going to be, or it may have been the 4, I don't even know. And I was like, man, this is going to be epic. None of these other cats are going to have the new iPhone, and it's got, slow-mo video and doing all this kind of stuff. I was like, I'm going to blow their socks off, all this kind of stuff. And they bust out their big cameras, and I'm like, what? And I was like, you guys brought your big cameras? And they were like, yeah. And that was the first time that it dawned on me, like, you know what? These, I call them the cool kids, are not taking pictures with their iPhone. And that was the first time where it was like, hey, Slusher, you better step it up, because everybody else is stepping it up. So from then on, and still to this day, I can tell the difference between an iPhone picture and a real, camera that is put on there. And so to make that all kind of come back around, I've had somebody either say, just write me a message that says, oh my gosh, I love that picture, I want to buy it. Well, shoot, that iPhone picture can only blown up to be like 8x10 or something like that.
Yeah,
like bigger is better. So from that point on, I carry my big camera with me, and there's, some people have a little smaller, digital camera that they have Wi-Fi on, and I'd love to have one of those cameras, but I can't, something, I'm a little bit old school when it comes to, I've rented, a camera to try. Like, I'm not going to go buy something and just be like, oh my God, I love it. Or, like I get it and I'm like, man, this sucks. I don't want this. I'm going to do my research. I'm going to rent it and then, do all that kind of stuff. So like I'm a Canon guy. And so I rented like a Sony or something like that and looked through the viewfinder, and it's a digital image in the viewfinder.
Oh, really?
Like, oh my gosh, it throws me way off. And so I think a lot of people these days, like maybe will take a picture and then download it to their phone and then post it to Instagram, which I still take my Canon. And if it's something, lickety split where I need to post it, which I haven't had to do it in a while, but I'll download it on my computer, run through my software, make it look how I want it to look, and then I'll send it to myself and then post it. So even with social media, I take it and you have commented a lot, like, it looks like you don't take any shit from anybody as far as like posting stuff. And I take it very seriously on what I post and how I post it. And, if somebody says, hey, such and such client, and they want to post it. And if it makes sense, I'll post it. But if it doesn't make sense, then I'm kind of like, I'll just put it on my Insta stories or something like that. And I just kind of use it as a promotional piece.
Sure. Well, you do a great job with it because, like I've said this to several other people that I've interviewed, and that's one of the reasons I want to interview them is because in all the noise of social media, when you're flipping through that phone looking at 3 or 4 pictures per second, it takes a lot for one to stand out, and it's really whenever I see yours up there, before I even see your name, I know it's yours because you've got such a unique style, and it's really, really cool. And that's a real talent to be able to make things stand out in all that static of the internet,
Well, I appreciate that. That's very kind of you to say. It's a lot of fun, and I try to, my brain gets in the way of a lot of stuff. And so when I go out and start, I have intentions of who I'm shooting for and what I'm shooting for, but for the most part, if I just turn that old brain off, then everything just kind of lines up and just takes care of itself. So
that's funny you say that, because I just talked with Duke Beardsley a few weeks ago for this podcast, and he said the exact same thing. That's what he said. He said he's a painter, and so he said don't think, paint. Yeah. And that I've heard that from a lot of people, and you hear that a lot with athletes as well. This idea of get out of your own way, turn your brain off, just go.
Yeah, I mean, I love. I grew up like playing golf and playing basketball and all kind of stuff. And that brain, like, I'm nowhere near like a good golfer, or I don't even play golf anymore. But the times that I did turn my brain off and just go through the motions, that's when it was good. So that it's taken me a long time to figure that out as far as photography goes. But if you do something enough, it becomes second nature. And that's one of those things. Like, if you practice something, if one of my favorite basketball players is for Oklahoma State University, and his name's he graduated, and I don't think he's not going to go pro or anything like that, but his name's Phil Forte, and he is a gym rat as far as basketball goes. Like, that's all anybody ever talked about, was he was always in the gym, always practicing free throws. He had, I think he set for sure at Oklahoma State, but he set the percentage, like he was always at, 90 some odd % from the free throw line, and practiced, he took from like middle school on to, I'm sure he still goes to the gym now, but he shot like 600 free throws a day and 600 3-pointers a day and all kind of stuff. I mean, that takes that type of ritual takes a lot of time for you to do that, especially for a kid to do that. You know what I mean? Like in college, I was really good at drinking beer.
Yeah. I'm always amazed at these 19, 20-year-olds working that hard, because I didn't have it in me at that age. If I could go back now at age 40, I'd be the man.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like one of your questions was like, what could you tell your 18-year-old self? I was like, do exactly the same stuff, but just don't worry about the small things. You know what I mean? Don't worry about what other people are thinking. Don't worry about all the stupid stuff that has to be with a teenager and all that kind of stuff. Just have fun and enjoy yourself, and things will work out for the best as long as you let things happen and you take initiative to recognize the right paths that you're supposed to go down. So that's my main deal, is like, as long as I recognize this story that someone's telling me that says, oh my gosh, that sounds like an epic photo shoot, and everything's been done, you know what I mean? But it hasn't been done by me. Mm-hmm. So even though so-and-so's done it or so-and-so's done it, hey, I haven't done it. So it's going to be different, and it may look kind of the same, but through my eye, I think it looks different. And so, that's another deal, is like, there's a lot of photographers out there these days, and you see a lot of it on social media, and a lot of people are doing the same stuff. But, like, just because somebody else is doing it doesn't mean you can't do it too. So I commend anybody who, I mean, it's all the same, but as long as you have a specific eye that, you can give it a little bit of a different spin on it, then do it. You know what I mean? Like, the world is yours as long as you are willing to take that initiative and go do it. So I love it when somebody tells me a story. Some of the most epic photo shoots that I've done have been a story that somebody told me. Mm-hmm. And like I told this twice yesterday. I said, if I take creative ideas very seriously, because if I have a creative idea and I don't act on it at some point, that creative idea is going to leave me and move on to the next person. So it might be, somebody else has that creative idea, and I see that, a couple years later or something like that. Like, man, I had that idea.
That was yours. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I had it. But, if I don't act on that creative thought that I have, then, and I don't know if people have a creative idea every day or every second or, or something like that. So I take it real serious on how creativity is to me and how it affects me. Because even though it might end up and it's not like the bee's knees of all epic photo shoots, it was meaningful to me because I took the initiative to go do something that took a lot of work or, was out of my comfort zone and all kind of stuff. So that's another deal, is like, it's just something you have to act on and something you have to do. So
yeah. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about, it seems like your whole life has been this willingness to just go, just jump in and do it and try something out. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, because, like you were saying, everybody has great ideas. It's the people that execute that matter. I mean, I could have said I invented the iPod back in 1985, but that'd be a cool idea. But so what?
Yeah.
Well, I can't. We've already been talking almost an hour, which is nuts. You want to just sit here and talk for 8 hours a day? So I got a few quick questions that I've been asking folks, and it's been nice to be able to compare and contrast their answers. So I'll just run through these real quick, then I'll let you get back to your day. Do you have any favorite books that have been meaningful either to your career in photography or, about Texas, about the West in general, just a book or two that stick out in your mind as important?
So I go back and forth on this, and I saw that question and it sticks out to me because I don't know if it's like my dad. He gets up at 3:30 in the morning and goes and he sits down and he starts reading, and he's reading a book all the time. My mom's always reading a book, but for whatever reason, I'm not a huge reader. Yeah. But so what I did when I saw that question is, these are the books that are next to my bedside.
Ooh, that's the book. That's the question I should ask people instead.
And so
I'm gonna steal that one.
Just because these books are sitting next to my bed doesn't mean that I am flipping pages.
You're absorbing their energy, though.
Exactly. And I have a story to go along with each one of these books. So the first book that I have sitting and so I'm in a studio with four other photographers.
Yep.
And each photographer shoots for different clients and all kind of stuff. And so, like yesterday there was a photographer here and there's a bunch of models and all kind of stuff, and things just kind of get left behind. So the first book was, and it was somebody left it. And so one day I was, I can't sit in front of my computer every day. So I sit and then we go play ping pong, or, I go get people stirred up to go eat lunch or something like that. And we'll all go eat lunch or something like that. And so, I went out and I was like, man, there wasn't anybody at the studio. So I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to have to go eat lunch by myself. Or, I was like, there's always a coffee table with magazines on it. So I'll look at these magazines. And there was a book sitting there, and it was Barbarian Days, A Surfing Life by William Finnegan.
That's my favorite. That's one of my favorite books of all time. I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it right here. I'm touching it right now.
And so I was like, I don't know what this book is, but I'm pretty good at water sports. Not to pat myself on the back or anything like that, but I was a lake rat when I grew up and stuff like that. So I've always wanted to surf, but I've never done it. I've surfed behind a wakeboarding boat and I'm pretty decent at it, but I've never actually been on the ocean and been on a surfboard. And that's something on my bucket list, but I'm not going to do it. Like I'm 2 or 3 times a year I go to LA, but I'm not just going to go out there and just go do it. Cause I want the perfect situation where I have the time to do it and all kind of stuff. So I started reading. I'm like, I sat there and read, and I couldn't even tell you the last time where I sat down and got into a book, and I sat there and read like 4 or 5 chapters.
It's a great book, man. That guy is an unbelievable writer. It's
really cool. And then the next book is Coyote America by Dan Flores.
Oh yeah, I just had him on the podcast.
Man, and it was given to me by my good friend Red Shahan, who's a Texas music artist, and he was like, Slusher, you got to read this book.
It's so good.
He was telling me about that. And then Teal gave me American Buffalo by Stephen Ranella.
Yeah, that's a really good one too. Stephen Ranella and Dan Flores was Ranella's teacher in grad school in Montana. Okay. And I had Dan on the podcast maybe like 2 or 3 episodes ago, because I read that Coyote book, and there's another one called American Serengeti, and I thought they were so good. And that guy is super cool. He's from Louisiana, and he taught at Texas Tech for a while. But I just always figured coyotes were just kind of scavenger, kind of garbage animals, but they're an unbelievably interesting animal, and they're of mammals, they're probably the closest to human in North America as far as the way they act. They're just really complex, kind of weird animals, and we can't kill them. Like the U.S. government tried to kill them, put every effort into trying to eliminate them from the face of the earth, and all they did was grow and grow and grow and spread, and it's pretty cool. Well, those are some good ones. You picked some of my favorites.
So, like I said, just because they're sitting there doesn't mean I've read through them and all kinds of stuff. So, my favorite book of all time is Rum Diaries by oh my gosh, I can't believe Hunter S. Thompson.
Yeah. I think I haven't read that, but I had it. Maybe I checked out from the library or something and didn't read it, but I need to read that, because he used to hang out in Aspen a lot. He's a wacko. I'd love to read more of his stuff. Are there any films that you like that come to mind?
And they're all, Teal's going to make fun of me, but they're all like, you said movies and documentaries and all kind of stuff, like Unbranded, man, that holds a special piece in my heart, because man, it's super cool. Ben did a great job, and
that one comes up time and again on this podcast. My gosh, everybody loves it.
So good. Movies that have influenced me, it's just everything kind of influences me for a different reason. Like I was thinking, like the movie Appaloosa. I love that movie. I'm more into the Western costumes in that movie, because I think they're really epic. And when something gets my attention like that, I think it's something that's pretty powerful when it comes to that. Like Lonesome Dove, I think that's on my list too, as a movie and all kind of stuff. But the costumes in it, or like the attire that they're wearing, didn't really stick out to me as being like, wow, like everybody has a, like the way they crease their hat and all kinds of stuff. It portrays a different way. But I mean, like another one that really sticks out, and this is going to be, everybody's going to laugh when I say this, but Nacho Libre. I mean, that movie is cinematography. Like that movie is shot so well that it just makes it a beautiful, beautiful, movie. And people are like, Nacho Libre is a beautiful movie. Yeah, if you look at the color and how, the location and where it's at and how they shot it and the color aspects that they use, man, it's epic. And Jack Black does a fantastic job.
I love Jack Black. Man,
he's funny.
Yeah, but he's hilarious.
Big Lebowski, anything by the Coen brothers, I really, really like. I listen to, I don't ever listen to Howard Stern. I listened to Howard Stern the other day driving back from West Texas, and I caught an interview with Jeff Bridges. And man, Jeff Bridges, I mean, I know he's a good guy and all that kind of stuff, but listening to him just be so almost like magical over an interview was just,
he's a cool guy.
Man, it blew me away. Like, even his photography is really cool. Like he uses a film camera, behind the scenes film camera, that is the wide Lux film camera, and it's like a wide angle panoramic deal. Mm-hmm. And so he's kind of taking a selfie a little bit in some of them, but he's also taking pictures of like behind the scenes of True Grit and the movies and stuff like that he's in. And it's just an interesting look of how it kind of goes about. So, man, he was just in that interview, he was just so complimentary of other people that he's worked with, and how, awesome that, he's just a very humble person and I learned a lot from that interview, because I was just like, man, he's so cool. And just the way that, he doesn't get, if he wasn't casted and he didn't get the part in that movie, he doesn't really take it all that seriously, because it's, it's like, I wasn't meant for that role. That role is meant for me if it's meant to be, and all kind of stuff. And the same thing can go with clients, you know what I mean? Like if, such and such client, if I put in a bid for that job and it doesn't happen or something like that, it wasn't meant to be, you know what I mean? Like that. So you got to move on and go on to the next one and just keep plugging along. And as long as you're doing what you're doing, all that stuff will come back to you. So that's kind of my whole deal, is you can't dwell on stuff that, you can make yourself better and do better the next time. If you're like, because everybody, even like a lawyer, or a doctor, or a carpenter, is like, man, if I would have cut that, or, if I would have done, if I would have said this or something like that. I do the same thing when I shoot. Like, man, if I would have gone out and done this, and taken a picture of that, save that and use that for the next one. So it's just one of those deals where just take the time. I don't know. I'm kind of ending this on a note, like, just take the time to listen to yourself and listen to the path that you're supposed to go down, and take the time to figure that out, and it'll all work out in the long run, I hope.
I think that's great advice. I was going to ask you, the way I generally end these conversations is if you could make a request to the people listening to this podcast, or, offer them some advice, some lessons learned that from your life, what would it be? And I think that's pretty damn good advice. That kind of answers that question.
Don't judge a book by its cover, because you never know what that book's going to be about. That could go for a person too. So, or a horse, or a camera, or, anything. So even though you're out and taking pictures on a cloudy day, make that cloudy day something that is meaningful. If somebody says, man, today is just not a good day for taking pictures. That's bullshit. Every day is a good day for taking pictures. You know what I mean? So every day is a good day to get out on a horse. Every day is a good day to get in your car and go drive around and find something to shoot. You know what I mean? Just because it's cloudy out or the sun's out or something like that, make it the best of what you can. So
get after it.
Get after it,
So how can people connect with you? And I'll have links to everything on the webpage.
The best way to get a hold of me is, Instagram is a good way to connect with people. A lot of my friends that I've made in the last couple of years have been through Instagram, and that's a good way. I will tell you this: I do not have my notifications turned on.
That's good.
I told you that. It's too much.
Yeah.
Too much in this world today to have your phone beeping and blowing up and all that kind of stuff. So I have 0 notifications turned on my phone, and if I don't get to your message, I'm very sorry. But email is a good way. Please don't text me out of the blue, because I don't really know whose phone number is who, and I'm a visual person. That's another deal. So I have to. If someone out of the blue says, "Hey, I met you at such and such," I'm gonna have a hard time. So just know that. But yeah, just anyway, like, even if you see me or if I see you or something like that, come up and introduce yourself. That's the one thing. I was in northern Oklahoma, and there was a bunch of cowboys sitting at a table, and they were kind of looking at me and all kind of stuff, and I kind of noticed them and all kind of stuff, and I walked out of there, and I told my mom, I was with my parents, and I was like, you know what, I should have went up and introduced myself to those guys. And you know what I did? I turned right back around and went in and introduced myself, and they were like, "Oh, you're Scott Slusher, da 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 da." And one of them, we went back and forth a couple of times on Instagram and stuff like that. So I love it when somebody introduces himself, or I go up and introduce myself, because you never know who somebody is, and if we see each other, something like that, oh man, I am so nice to talk to. So please introduce yourself.
You need to be a little more outgoing, I think.
You think?
All right, man, this was awesome. Thank you so much, and
hey.
I look forward to meeting you in person one of these days.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hey, this is Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and thanks for listening to that particular episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Before you go, I've got 3 quick things. Number 1, if you like the podcast, please do me a huge favor. Either pass it along to a friend who may be interested, share it on your social media, or go to iTunes and give it a 5-star review. All those things would mean a lot to me, and they would really help to spread the word about the podcast. Number 2, if you've listened to many of these episodes, you know that I love reading and I love talking about books. Every other month, I send out a quick email with a few books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The subjects are varied, but they're pretty much all nonfiction with an emphasis on history, biographies, adventure narratives, and topics related to the American West. There are no sales pitches for ranches, no spam, no other kind of nonsense, just books. So if you'd like to sign up for the list, head to Mountain and Prairie/reading, or just go to Mountain and Prairie, and there's a massive tab at the top that says book recommendations. Click on it. There are a ton of good books that I've read. Some of the old email lists are on there. You can go crazy. There are a lot of books. And finally, if you know anyone I should interview for the podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. All my contact info is at mountainandprairie.com, and I'm on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to have some recommendations and suggestions of interesting people I should meet. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.